All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, so episode 2. I think the topic that we want to first dive into is a little mental health.
Mental
I think,
health. Yeah. Super
I think,
important topic to discuss.
I think so. I think that's a focal point of what we as just friends talk about quite a bit. I know
Yeah.
you suggested a recent app recently. You use that yourself, right?
Yeah. I've been using a lot of app called Headspace, which essentially the purpose of the app is like mindfulness meditation, but a lot of mental health issues, problems dealing with anxiety, depression, etc. can, I think, be helped by meditation mindfulness practice. So I've been using it. I think it's pretty good. Um, Encourage you to use it and everyone to check it out, to just try it. So let's say from a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say your mental health is right now?
Shit, bro, you putting me on the spot like that. Uh, dude, honestly, I would have to give it like a 3. I would say that over the past month, it's been at a 1, and so I'm doing slightly better. Still pretty low in when it comes to like the day to day. I have been implementing more structured plans in terms of like going to the gym more consistently. When I am at the gym, I make sure to deviate at least or put at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes of time in the sauna. And for the sauna, what I'll do is like put on my beats, like noise canceling headphones, close my eyes, and just do peaceful like music. Or maybe I'll just go quiet, like just use the noise cancellation, white noise, pretty much, and just focus on my breathing, sitting properly, just pretty much meditating. And I feel like that has helped quite a bit. Uh, but like you know very well, Rome isn't built in a day. You're not going to instantly see those results from one day to the next. I actually watch a lot of mental health YouTube as well, whether it's from like Healthy Gamer GG or even like professionals. I'll sometimes have you ever seen those like MIT courses that they offer?
No,
So
I know
MIT,
they offer like boot camps and stuff like that, where you can get like a certificate or something like that.
yeah. So MIT actually offers online courses. So like they're pre-recorded courses that like it'll be like psychology 101 taught at fucking MIT or fucking excuse my language, but or maybe it's like for example, I watched one that had to do with poker. There was a poker course that a professor taught at a school. I believe it was either Harvard or MIT, and they talk about the logical like theory behind poker, the like pretty much the strategy behind it. But going back to the topic, I at one point a couple of weeks ago, I watched a 2.5 long lecture on like psychology 101 on YouTube. And that's like the degree. I never thought I'd be watching a fucking course online in my free time. But that's how impactful my mental health has been to me, whether it's positively or negatively, mostly negatively these days. But uh, I've never thought I'd be the type of person who like actively studies a course just for the hell of it, just to learn. When I was
Yeah,
in school, I had a purpose of graduating, so sort of felt like part of me is enticed to take that course and to try hard and put in your maximum effort. But I'll I'll watch like hours of content a week on mental health. So it is very important to me. I do think right now during the pandemic, or I don't even, are we even considered in the pandemic anymore? I'm not even sure, bro, at this point. I feel like some people do. Some people say that
it's controversial. It's debatable, but
controversy.
it's actually it's interesting you say about the course, because normally we think taking a course, you think of school, like you're in a class where you're progressing towards your degree or whatever the case may be. But I've actually, there's courses you can take courses, in different websites that offer little. I don't know if you know. Do you know the website Skillshare?
No, I've never heard of it.
So website Skillshare, the entire purpose of the website is people creators, where they make little mini courses teaching a skill of some kind, whether photography, design, whatever the case may be. There's a ton of stuff to learn on there. But actually, when it an academic setting, there are colleges that just offer, not even for credits or for purpose of degree or whatever, just a course, free courses about, history, um, religion, whatever the case you might be interested in. And you just take the course just to learn. You sign up with your email, and the course starts, and then you go through assignments. There's no grades or anything. It's kind of just use self your own pace learning about whatever the subject may be. So it's interesting because most people, when they go to school, it's kind of like you're forced in a sense to take whatever courses are required for your degree, whatever, even though you may not be extremely interested in that particular subject for the course. But for you to go out of your way to take a course on some, that means that the subject must actually interest you significantly. So I think that's telling, especially for this subject that we're talking about, mental health, how you're actually going out of your way to seek an online course to study it because it affects you that much. And that just goes to show how important your mentals are, dude. Like, a lot of people don't think about it, or it's shrugged. It's like stigma associated with it or whatever. But it actually affects your day to day significantly, especially when you're dealing with it because it's on your head. Even though there's outside factors that are affecting it, at the end of the day, you can't. It's not like something else where you can it or change settings. It's literally in your head where you're living with it every day. So incredible
Yeah.
to
So
address.
it's funny how you mentioned like these like courses you could pay for. I keep hyping on this same YouTube channel, the Healthy Gamer GG, just because it relates perfectly with my condition. I'm a gamer. He focuses on mental health regarding gaming and the addiction associated with it. I actually, for the first time ever in any type of context, I paid for like one of those YouTube courses. Like, you know how, like, for example, if you watch like a podcast on YouTube, they're gonna sell a $200 course on like how to
Yes.
become a
Yeah.
podcaster. The website, or sorry, the YouTube channel I watched, the Healthy Gamer one, they offered a course on depression, and the course is like, it's not meant to help like fully resolve your depression issue, but it's to have you identify the issues and like the patterns that you're going through to help better understand how you can proceed to fix the issues. And it's a lot of technical side, a lot of technical learning, while also helping you identify, like, because if you don't have the knowledge or the research, you don't know why this behavior is fully happening. If one day you're waking up and you can't wake up till 1 p.m. because your body's not letting you, and that happens for weeks at a time, some people may think that they're physically ill.
Right.
While
Right.
that's way more of an indicator these days that you may be suffering from depression or anxiety. And until you realize these symptoms and you realize how your brain tricks you into these patterns, it's hard for you yourself to start tackling the issue. And so I spent, I think it was $20. He had a promotion. Like $20, you get this whole course, and it's pretty expensive. I actually haven't fully finished it, and I bought it over a month ago. He has like for each like little segment, he has like a video where he talks to you. He has a bunch of information that he has, like articles written and links that you could go to cross reference this, and it actually does help. And it, but the fact of the matter is, COVID, what I went over earlier with whole COVID, I feel like COVID has negatively impacted a lot of people's mental health. The current state of the our lives right now, with everything going on with Ukraine, the supply shortage. Like the other day, yesterday specifically, I went to Target, and I would say about 20% of their items were like sold out. Like, I went to a Target that, like, their whole like cat aisle, like their animal aisle, was like bare, empty. And for most people, like, I'm assuming they see that, and that's a scary. That's a scary proposition to know that your major retail stores in the US are struggling to supply. Like I've noticed there's like a chicken shortage, or not, maybe not shortage, but at least there's like limited supply of buying chicken these days. And that's a staple item that I eat every day. Um, and that negatively impacts my mental health. I'm thinking, dude, with everything that's going on with this war, everything that's going on in my personal life with my mental health, everything that the financial struggles, the physical struggles, everything, it all coagulates into one stressful, mental, heavy issue. And I think a lot of Americans are currently going through that. I mean, I follow like Reddit. I'm like one of those Reddit boomers or like millennials who like, I'm on Reddit a lot. I'm on YouTube a lot. I'm not really
Yeah, I don't think you're a boomer.
not a boomer yet. Give me like
You don't qualify as a boomer.
5 more years and I won't even be able to ball you up anymore, bro. But anyway, the point being is that mental health has gone up due to COVID, due to a lot of these different scenarios going through everyone's mind. And a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
think
people,
yeah, like mental health is incredibly important. It affects your day to day life. So I guess to be a little bit more, shall we say, creator specific. Let's talk about how like your day to day. For example, you personally, how do you notice? Do you notice even when you feel like you're in a mental health slump? How what specifically do you notice in whether it be psychological, whatever, where you recognize that you're struggling mentally?
yeah,
What kind of things looking out for, or do you feel um, that gives you that indication?
yeah. So for me personally, I've been suffering with depression pretty much since my teenage years. So I'm fortunate enough to know some of the signs of when I'm experiencing it. For me, it's very gradual. I almost won't notice right away that I'm slipping down that slope. And usually the first sign is actually canceling plans. And it's such a mundane thing. Like, oh, everyone cancels plans once in a while, right? Like it's natural. Things come up. Um, Canceling plans to me correlates more to anxiety and mental thinking more so than physical, almost 99% of the time. Very rarely do I cancel plans that I've, because I'm pretty good about like, hey, I told you, Leroy, I'm gonna be at your house at 8 p.m. on Friday. I'm pretty good at making that time a reality. But when I'm going through these slumps, I'll start like rationalizing with myself, like, oh, you're just really tired. You had a long day at work, like, and that's how it starts. It starts very, very slowly. It starts with me like once in a while canceling plans. I'll feel more drained, like tired physically and mentally more often. Eventually,
So,
that increases to me waking up late and oversleeping. And then what's the craziest part, and this is the most like mind blowing realization I've had for myself when it comes to depression specifically, is it directly shows on the scale for me. 100% of the time, if I'm gaining weight, there's something mentally off about me, whether it's anxiety, depression. Usually it's more depression related when I gain weight. And when I'm in good mental health, my gym routine, my diet, my exercise in general is always pristine.
everything is dialed in.
What about you though? What are the symptoms you see when you start going down that slippery
Um,
slope?
for me, it's a lot of anxiety related stuff. Where anxiety it can get bad to the point where you feel physical. Um, you might feel like a tightness in your chest, or you might feel like you're having palpitations or whatever the case may be. So it can manifest physically. So sometimes, for some reason, it's an indication of like, hey, I don't hate my job or anything. But for example, when I know that I have work day that I'm going into the hospital day, um, it almost feels like the day that I'm having right now less terrible because I know I get up very, very early to go into the hospital. Um, it's hard to describe. It's sort of like I'm kind of like I'm present, or I'm not fully enjoying the moment, or whatever I'm doing, it seems bland or it seems dry because I know tomorrow I'm gonna have to go in, and so I don't know, for some reason that affects me. I have dealt. I think I wouldn't say full depression, but sometimes you do like down where like you lose interest in doing things that normally you would be interested in doing, or things seem like just like a bore. Like it's difficult to get on to do basic tasks like you know do the dishes, or run the crib, or dogs, whatever. All that seems like a heavy lift that requires a lot of energy,
when
when
normally it
realistically,
shouldn't.
when normally it shouldn't. And on normal days, those tasks are you just move. That's mostly how it manifests for me. And I've in the past dealt with like symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, where I'll have like recurrent intrusive thoughts, things that normal people don't fucking sorry for my language, but and I put it and specifically remember when I first downloaded Headspace, the app we were talking about. I specifically remember where I was when I came to the realization that I should look into it, whatever. Um, before ever looking into this, or in general, I've known about meditation for a significant amount of time. Um, with listening to Joe Rogan and hearing people like Harris talk about the benefits of meditation and whatnot. And I remember using Sam Harris's app, picking up app, a couple of times, and it felt really good doing it. But I remember, but I, like things, you just it doesn't, you don't stick with it, so it just dies out, whatever, to it anymore.
Dude,
But when I
it's
I was on a trip in New York, and I was experiencing these like and thoughts, like intrusive thoughts, and I remember looking up as we were leaving New York in our Uber to the airport. There was big on one of the buildings, like how in Times Square they have the massive ad buildings. One
mhm.
of the big ad buildings was head, and it was about like mental health and like improve your mindfulness, whatever. And I was like, I mean, I might as well give it a try. No reason not to. From a standpoint, I've known about the benefits, and so I downloaded it, and it helped me so much, with all of that, because a lot of the situation, or a lot of times when you're thinking about mental health or anxiety, depression, etc., you get your thoughts, and it's important because you might associate yourself with thoughts, when realistically, not just really objectively, this is how it is. You are not your thoughts, because your brain is constantly a bunch of spend have dopamine everywhere random shit that just a bunch of information, all of it. And so it never really has a chance to calm down and recenter yourself. So you might think about certain things, and what the fuck, why did I just think about that? Oh, that's not like me. And then the way that it manifested was I would think about these intrusive thoughts, and then because I would have those intrusive thoughts, I would start thinking like, what the fuck am I thinking that? And then I would spiral into thinking about thinking it. You know what I mean? So then a vicious cycle, and it would go down that way. Stop just thinking about it. And so when I started meditating, the whole point is to realize, hey, your mind is racing. Just racing, and don't just understand that you're but you're thinking mind thinks a bunch of crazy thoughts. Just under
Um, the video's a little cutting out right now. Are you still talking?
good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but your video's frozen. That's weird.
That's it's really good on my end.
Maybe it's because I'm on the Melon app. Anyway, we could always cut this out, this part right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I lost part of what you were speaking because of the lag, but there's one thing I do want to like harp on. The thing you mentioned about the whole almost like your mental isn't letting you recognize who you are as a person. It's a scary realization, and this is something that I personally fight with to this very day, is to realize that the person you are under these conditions, whether it's ADHD, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar, etc., when you are when you are in the middle of it, when you're feeling these effects strongly, that is not the same person you are internally at your best, at your normal, at your base level. And
Right.
what's crazy is no matter how much confirmation I could use with my mind, right? Like I could look back at myself, not to humble brag, this is purely for an example. But like at one point I was going to school full time, I was working full time, I was on a League of Legends team, I was hanging out with friends. I was able to multitask that without any huge issue. And nowadays I'm like sleeping for anywhere from 3 hours a night to 13 hours a night, depending on what the mood is. If I have anxiety in the morning versus if I feel more depression, I usually sleep longer. Anxiety usually wakes me up almost like adrenaline. Um, and you almost tell yourself like, hey, like this isn't you. Like the ways you're thinking, like something you harped on earlier that I really resonate with is like you don't want to do the things you normally find enjoyable, and you almost find reasons not to do them. So like the gym in general has been a huge positive component in my life, where I've done it on and off for about the past 6 years, ever since 2015. And whenever I'm doing like active at the gym working out, I always feel like it's a very positive experience in my life that I should keep around. But whenever I go into these like depressive moods or life gets in the way, it's sometimes one of the most hardest things to get back into, even though internally I love the gym. And it's a very conflicting feeling having to fight against depression you versus normal you. Sometimes you don't even remember what normal you is like. And it sort of fucks with you the same way you were referencing in like that New York scenario, where you think about one thing and then it escalates to another thought and it keeps getting overwhelming to the point where you're shattered. Like your thought process is shattered, and you almost don't seem sane in like how you got to that realization or that final point. Like you make one correlation to another correlation, and then that you make another leap into like something completely unrelated, then bring that back to the original point, and you think you completed the puzzle when the puzzle wasn't completed, it just scrambled in your head. And so to wrap this little point up, I feel like when you're in the thick of it, it's almost impossible to get yourself out of it without proactive problem solving. And it sounds like an escape. It sounds like it is. I'm not trying to say it isn't a mental illness, because it is. It's something very hard to deal with. But if you mindlessly just try to be like, hey, it's just a mood, it'll go away. Maybe if you suffer from like diagnosed depression, that is periodical. Usually when you have like depression, like clinically, it usually lasts for about a year at a time. But if you're also suffering from multiple conditions, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD, those can overlap each other. And so you may never get to a good point in your life, whether like you feel good. because you might have depression for 1 year, and then your anxiety kicks up as soon as that year is over. And then you might also be suffering from ADHD on the side. And before you finally resolve that, the depression's back 7 months later. And you have another 3 month stint of that during the winter. Um, so my final, like, I guess, point would be that no matter how much you want to push it aside, like most things in life, the best solution is to tackle it head on. Realize how weak you are, because once you realize where the bottom is, you only could go up from there.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make. And we've been talking a lot about like the negatives and what it feels like and how it's like tough and whatever. But there's all we can also discuss the proactive things that you can do to recognize when you're in that slump and what steps can you take to get out of it. Um, for me personally, things that make me feel better, for example, um, just getting outside of the house, feeling like you're in the world, like you're in nature, feeling like hitting the sun hitting your face, feeling like the wind hit you, and all of those things are incredibly beneficial. At least to me, I feel much better once I get outside and I walk around. I feel the sun, I get a breeze, and it feels good. Um, Another thing, obviously, for me is mindfulness practice. When I focus on my breath, um, I go through these lessons and on the app, and I think about all that stuff. I feel much better. Um, also understanding perspective, like recognizing that yes, it sucks, but it's okay. Like you're not a worse human because you're dealing with mental health stuff. A lot of people deal with mental health stuff. It's totally normal. Not that it's normal, but it's not. You're. I hate how there's like stigma attached to it. Um, it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and there's many things that you can do to be okay. And just because you have a situation where you're suffering from mental health, that's fine. It's just an extra fight in your life that you need to go through. A lot of people deal with a bunch of stuff. This is one of the things that you deal with, and that's fine because it is what it is, and you can deal with it through various different means. So, what kind of activities do you do where you recognize? You mentioned the gym. Is there anything else that you do where you think like, wow, like after doing this, I feel better? I notice a marked improvement in my mood and in how I feel physically, mentally. I don't feel like I'm in the slump anymore. I have, you know, energy. Like I want to do things. I'm excited for things because that's one of the things that I don't know if it's your case, but for me, it's like I don't really like when I'm in a slump. I don't feel excited to do things. Um, I might be like, I know I'm gonna hang out with my friends later, but whatever. Like it's gonna be boring until I get there, and then it's fun. But you're already prejudging the events because you're in a slump. Does that do you resonate with that? And what kind of activities do you do that make you feel better?
Man, I feel like you're in my mind right now, bro. Maybe you could be my psychiatrist. but uh but on the real, um a lot of the things you mentioned resonates with me. Last night, I got invited to go to it's a place in Orlando called Jelly Rolls. It's pretty much like a club, but it's more like Disney employees. It was a Sunday night, so on Sunday nights they get Disney employees in for free. It's pretty much like they have like two pianists, and then they have a dance floor with a bunch of tables. You put in requests for songs, they play the song. You drink a lot. I'm sure people are smoking outdoors, whatever, right? It's at the boardwalk in Orlando, so it's a really beautiful location. Nice, nice like entertainment in general. And yesterday, I had to force myself to go because honestly, it didn't even sound fun. And normally, I think that would be a fun experience to me to go out, meet people, enjoy the Orlando culture and what it has to offer. But I had to will myself, like, just say, fuck it, Eric, whatever you're thinking in your head, ignore it. Just go. Like, stop listening to yourself. Don't make excuses. Just go. And if you don't like it at the end of the night, well, fuck it. At least you went and you proved to yourself that you could go. And that's the active thinking I have to do when I'm in this mental state. It's like same thing for the gym. Let's say I'm trying to go to the gym about 45 days a week on average. 2 of those days I'll be going no issues, like automatic, like a machine gun. But other days I feel like I have to like load the rounds into the rifle, like I'm using a bayonet type shit, and like I'm fumbling the bullet. If that's a good analogy, because like I have to force myself to be like, hey, Eric, you have to go to the gym. This is gonna help you mentally. As much as you just want to sit on your ass, as much as you just want to rest and relax and take a nap, just go. Just go. And that's like a mental fight I have to have with myself on multiple things. Well, even with my girlfriend, like I'll be dating, we'll have a plan to go on a date to go to the parks, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to waste my fucking time going to the park, bro. I don't want to go on this date, bro. I'm fine chilling. Let's watch a show in the house. Like, let's put on a movie. Like, I don't want to get out of here. And so, a lot of these things take proactive effort. And for me, besides meditation, which, if I'm being honest, I've been lackluster on, and it's true, you have to be consistent with a lot of these methods for it to be effective. Besides going to the gym, the number one thing that has helped me, because everyone has different core roots to why their mental health is affected, right? For me, a lot of it is about being proactive and feeling like I'm leveling up. So if I feel like I'm stagnating in my life, or I'm going the opposite direction in terms of my weight, my professional career, my personal life, whatever it is, that is going to negatively affect me. So the best things I can do for myself, what I've realized is do the small things that you want to do and don't let yourself be stopped by yourself. And
Right.
that has been the number one thing to me. So like going out and getting sun, I do that every day. I don't know if you can see behind the window, we have a little porch outside. I'll just like if I'm home all day, like I didn't get out, I'll just sit out there for 20 minutes with my cat and just chill. And I won't be on my phone. I'll listen to music or whatever. I'll do something with myself other than being tied to technology. That helps a shit ton. Going to the gym helps a shit ton. Making sure that no matter what task it is, even if it's as simple as doing the laundry, if I told myself I was going to do it that day, I'm going to do it that day. And what happens is it's positive reinforcement. You end that day with, hey, you did what you set out to do. You don't have to feel guilty that you wasted a day or wasted half your day or whatever it is. You did what you said you were doing. Maybe it wasn't that much you put on your plate, but you did what you were assigned. And then for me, it's an active effort to make sure that whatever I do say, not to overburn myself. I'm not telling myself to go to the gym for 4 hours, go for a walk for 2 hours, make sure to do research on this topic for 4 hours. Like it's not even that severe. It's like go to the gym for an hour and a half, go outside, maybe go for a walk for 30 minutes a day, do the dishes, like do the laundry, vacuum, whatever it is, and just do that. That has been the number one way to make sure I'm going to sleep not thinking I'm a fuck up.
It's interesting. You mentioned a couple things that I wanna circle back to. The first one I heard say that really lit a light bulb in my brain was when you mentioned about going on a date with your girlfriend. And then you said that why am I going to waste my time doing this? Let's, for example, when you like go to the park, why am I going to waste my time doing this? Let's just stay in and watch a movie. When you mentioned that, it made me think of, could there a possibility where it's not, maybe it's not so much an issue of you're feeling like you have depression or anxiety, or maybe it is that, but could it be directly linked, perhaps, why what the reason is that you're dealing with this, the cause of it? Could it be something related to like a dopamine overload, where your brain would much prefer you just chilling on your couch, taking in a movie, which ultimately is a mindless activity, as opposed to the effort that would be required in getting to the gym and going to the park, and where it's not as sexy and as much of a hit of entertainment and dopamine stimulation to your brain. So you're so subconsciously you're devaluing that activity as opposed to watching a movie on Netflix or whatever the case may be. What do you think about that?
It's interesting. I don't know too much about dopamine because there's a lot of curious information on the internet regarding dopamine. I don't personally believe in dopamine detoxes, for example. I think those are more like theory based than factual. So like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like dopamine detox. It's like
I've heard of
those
it. Yeah.
I've heard of it too, and honestly, like the feedback I get, whether it's from listening to this or looking up articles, is that it's not well researched. Um, but the idea of dopamine definitely exists. It's a chemical in your brain. Um, as for like the whole, that's a great question. Hmm.
It's interesting because I'll give you a personal example as to why it made me think that. In We live in the United States where we have access to whatever we want, whenever we want, the internet, whatever, and we're constantly being bombarded by like notifications, whatever, social media, and so we're constantly being hit by dopamine hits, right? And to stay on the dopamine topic, um, I noticed that when I take a trip, to Cuba, for example, where there's no internet, there's very little access to modern day electronics and the constant stimulation that you feel from those things. When your phone's not giving you any kind of notification, you can't access the internet at all. It's just like whatever you have on there, like the calculator app or photos, whatever. I
The
noticed that,
calculator app.
and this happens to me every time. Every time I go to Cuba, I'll take a book with me, and I will literally read the entire book while I'm in Cuba, dude, because it is the most like stimulating activity while I'm there. Other than, of course, hanging out with family, going to the beach, whatever. But in the downtime, when we're not doing some sort of pre-planned activity, the most interesting thing is reading whatever book I have. And so I get a shit ton of reading done when I'm disconnected from electronics, Wi-Fi, etc., where I don't have access to that. And then when I return to the States, it's almost like the reading is no longer in the priority list of like what's going to be most stimulating to me as playing a video game, going on social media, watching a YouTube video, Netflix, whatever. So suddenly I no longer value that as highly as the other things.
Yeah.
That's why like I think that there's got to be a lot of truth to that.
I
Where
definitely think there's some truth to it. However, I'm gonna push back a little bit because I think that more so ties into instant gratification and that dopamine hit more so than if it's the right thing to do for you or not. So, for example, if we're being purely critical here, you are visiting your family in Cuba, right? You understand beforehand you are not going to have internet. In the same way, like I've experienced that with going on a cruise. You have to pay for the Wi-Fi package, which is like fucking two nut sacks of fucking money
it's
a day.
expensive, yeah, it's
It's
expensive.
expensive, and honestly, that's not the point of me going on the cruise. And I think you feel the same way with going to Cuba. The main point in Cuba is not to go on the internet and watch YouTube. The main point is to visit your family, create these bonds with them, experience, maybe humble yourself a little bit because I feel like I would feel that way as me being also part Cuban, being like, "Oh, this is how my ancestors lived. Like this is my family who I haven't seen in years or months or whatever it was. I
Right.
want to spend some quality time with them." And
Right.
obviously it's not going to be perfect cuz your family is not going to be doing everything every day at all times. So you're going to
Right.
want that book for the downtime. But realistically, in the same way like the gym and like going outside in the long term is going to be a positive influence for me. I think if you had the option to have your phone there in Cuba, you would have used it. But that has to
100%.
come down, I think that's more so discipline than anything else. Because if you're
100%.
disciplined enough, you will realize that like, hey, I'm in Cuba. Like this is my family that I may not see in a couple of years. If there's another bad case of COVID, for example, and there's travel restrictions or whatever it is, there may be a time where I might be not be able to see them. And so, um, dopamine can play a part in it. Obviously, like the accessibility of being on my phone right now, opening it up, going to Instagram and Snapchat, it's almost a reflex at this point. But in actuality, I'm just pushing away my responsibilities. And that's how I see it personally. It's like the same way I spend hours a day, like if I'm slacking off, right? I'm gonna spend a good chunk of my day playing video games, even though it's not even fun to me at this point. Like it's enjoyable. It's better than neutral, but I know what's gonna better me in the long term. And I think we're just kicking the can down the road by just saying, "Hey, like I'm gonna bring like the book example in Cuba. I think I would bring a book as well because there's gonna be times where you're sweating your balls off in your tin hut, bro, and you don't know what the fuck to do with yourself, and you're gonna want to read a book or something to take your mind off of it or whatever. That makes perfect sense. But like I couldn't envision a legitimate reason why someone would bring their phone to Cuba unless it was like work related, for example. I understand that they don't have cell phone reception, so there's no
I mean,
option.
yeah, it's all about like there's something to be said about the environment change where you no longer have access to these things, therefore you're prioritizing different things because ultimately the goal is to not be bored out of your mind. And so what is going to give me that stimulation? Well, in Cuba it's not going to be the internet, it's not going to be your phone, whatever. Instead, you get the same level of stimulation where you're not bored through the book. At least for me, that's how it is. So
Is it the same though? I feel like it's an alternative.
but you're entertained. You're not
Are you
doing nothing.
how entertained are you though? So for me, I'm gonna push back on this because the only reason why you're reading that book is because you don't have access to your cell phone. You don't have access to video games.
Well, you have to
So
have a predisposition. So I mean, of course, I like to read. I have a predisposition to read, and reading is interesting, but it's not oftentimes as interesting as playing a game of League of Legends, for example. So
mhm.
you don't do it when you're here, but when you're there and you don't have access to that, it suddenly becomes much more interesting. And it's suddenly rank one now in the most interesting thing that I can be doing for the next 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to the other myriad of things.
How,
Um,
how how do you think we operated as a species like 150 years ago?
right. So exactly environment. So it's much different because I mean, I think in the modern world we have access to all these technologies. It becomes much more difficult to focus. And I think like if you I don't know how of course you have to do a study of this or whatever. I'm sure research has been done, but probably attention span and you know a lot of mental health issues could be tied to it of how stimulated we are constantly all the time by all the things that we're seeing with our apps and phones and social media, as opposed to 150 years ago. To like let's talk about like the Romans. You know what I mean? What was the most interesting thing that they were doing? Probably when the Colosseum, the gladiator games were on, everybody went there to watch that. It's like watching a football game today.
Mhm.
You know
100%.
um,
100%.
that was probably the most stimulating activity. Sports was probably much more stimulating than you have a shit ton of fun going on playing a game of soccer. I don't know. I mean, I assume soccer was around 150 years ago, probably not during the time of the Romans, but 150 years ago, maybe they went out and played some soccer. If it was around, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
fucking know. But they were doing other things that reading books. They were doing other things that was not just doing this fucking on TikTok video, 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 and you can and a lot of time passes and you don't even notice it. Like you start using TikTok and then you look up and it's 30 minutes later and you're like, fuck, I didn't do anything. I've just been scrolling on TikTok. And it's hard to, you always want to hit the next thing because you're constantly being stimulated. You're constantly getting that. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think that it should be looked into further. I think
I
that's a
I
root cause of a lot of these things.
I think a lot of mental health is now starting to get parsed through and getting the attention it deserves when it comes to funding and researching. And I hope it only keeps increasing because this is a huge issue going on, not only in the U.S. but across the world. Um, But I will add this, that we as humans have become very spoiled, like very very spoiled. I see, like, I'm on Instagram, bro, and you know how, like, based on like what you watch and what they'll feed you information and different like posts.
Yeah.
There was this one post I saw, and it's very cheesy, but it's something along the lines of like, tough men create easy times, easy men create tough times, tough times create tough men. And the
Yeah.
lot
Yeah. I know
the lo
exactly what you're talking about.
you know what I'm talking about, right? And
Hard times create strong men create good times create
weak men,
weak men create tough times. Yeah.
right now we are very weak men as a
Yeah.
species,
I think
bro.
we're in the weak men cycle right now
We
for sure.
are unwilling. Now I don't want to get too political on this, but from a like a individual standpoint, Americans specifically have never gotten fucked over more based on an economic scale than they are right now. When it comes to minimum wage, when it comes to healthcare costs, like when it comes to student loans and the predatory actions that results in, we as Americans are getting screwed over. Most Americans my age and younger will never be able to afford a house or retire comfortably. And you know what? If this was happening in a by with tough men that existed, we would have not let this slip like it did. We had a very peaceful time for the past 50 years or whatever, and it's created a lot of simplicity and understanding that, hey, we have a comfortable life here. Let's not push it. And slowly but surely, minimum wage has not increased, but we companies are making more money than ever, and we are still getting resilience or resistance, excuse me, on these huge topics. Like, minimum wage still hasn't been increased, and at this point, the 15-minute minimum wage marker that people originally had is still completely under the amount that we need based on inflation, rising cost of homes. And if this was in a tough men area, we would have rioted, bro. I'm sorry to say it. We would have, there's people who are, I thought I saw a statistic, I don't know the exact number, but it was something like 30 something percent of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. That is a third of our people who can't even afford to get like their tire changed or a repair in their car because they literally have $0 after their paycheck is spent. How is this a thing that is being tolerated? And so, based on that quote you corrected me on earlier, I feel like right now we are a very weak generation when it comes to our mental and physical. Like, Ukraine is the exception, dude. These Ukraine guys, they're ballers, bro. But Americans in specific, I only can speak on us.
People in the West, I would say.
In the West are very spoiled. The instant gratification thing, the phones, the internet, the fact that you could work from home now, even though that's a great thing. And I do think workers should benefit more from being comfortable instead of appeasing their employers. But I digress. But the point is, we are in a more comfortable time. We are not in wartime for Americans yet, and I feel like that those times are what's going to create the change we need. Look. All right, I keep getting political here, but I'm sorry. I'm just very passionate about this subject. Biden, as a president, has made one of his fundamental campaign promises being about correcting student loans. That is one of the reasons why I picked him over Trump, even though I'm not a like uh, political affiliation doesn't matter. But one of the reasons that I thought was very enticing to me as a voter was reducing student loans, because I personally have student loans. And what happened as a campaign promise of at least 30K a year, it's looking like he right now won't even reduce student loans. And if that happened, if I had a leader 200 years ago who promised all these things and then they didn't follow through, there would have to be a change in the soon future. And I feel like we just keep going from one politician to another with empty promises that don't do what they say they're going to do. And so, um, in general, I think we we have to realize that a lot of this instant gratification, like when you're in Cuba with your book, when I'm at home with my phone, when we can choose to either play games or work on something that we're passionate about, we have to understand that the harder path is usually the correct path. And that goes for mental health as well. The hardest things that, like, for example, like you mentioned, how you have to meditate frequently to create a pattern of success and helping you. Same thing goes for going to the gym. Same thing goes for getting outside and walking or exercising. Same thing happens for, like, for us right now when we're trying to work on this podcast and we keep getting delayed, or something happens in our lives where we get distracted, get complacent. We have to act like we are going to do whatever it takes to get this done, in the same way that, what, 200 years ago Americans revolted against Britain, and they said, I don't give a fuck anymore. That's legitimately a real-time example of what a lot of Americans are going through. We're getting beat down, bro. But we're getting beat down by our own people this time. It's not a different country.
Yeah, dude. A lot of what you said there was interesting. And I guess I'll just touch on one thing that you said there, because you said a lot. I'm
I
trying
know.
to pick
I
up,
ramble a
but
little bit. It's
but
all right.
one thing that stood out to me was specifically when it comes to like previous generations and what they had to deal with. Like that's something that I've used in the past, or like something to consider, right? It's like, yeah, you're dealing with, you feel some anxiety or whatever, but it's not as bad as storming the beaches of Normandy, you know? Like it's not as bad as, being in the Marine Corps at Iwo Jima. You know what I mean? It's not like the Japanese having a nuclear bomb dropped on them. And so that's the balance, and that really affects, that's part of the discussion. So it's like there's a lot, and what that does, it gives you perspective, and it makes you realize, like, yeah, it sucks that you're having anxiety, depression, etc., but you also have a lot to be grateful for. There's a lot for you to be thankful for in your life. Like a lot of things could go worse, have gone worse for a lot of people, is going worse right now actively as we speak.
Agreed.
So that understanding that, having that nuance, for me at least, helps me to recognize, like, hey, yeah, this sucks, but I can deal with it in the same way that,
How often are you able to actively make that work though? Because I feel like I'll try to tell myself that, and like I almost don't listen to myself.
well, I'll give you a real life example. I'll be at work, right? And I'll be having a rough day, right? And as I'm having the rough day, yeah, it sucks. But I think to myself, like, hey, like, yeah, it sucks, but I mean, compared to fighting the Nazis in Germany, like, whatever, bro. Like,
Yeah,
who
I
gives a
do. I
shit?
do think that's partially toxic though,
But there is,
because
that's what I'm saying. There is some, but it also is a balance, because it's like, just because fighting the Nazis in Germany is harder, storming the beach of Normandy is rough. People were getting shot and killed, literally walking up the beach, doesn't necessarily diminish the fact that you're struggling. So it's not to minimize it. Your struggle is also legit, but then the counter argument to that is it though? Because ultimately,
it's all
there are
relative.
much things, of course, but it is true that you are suffering, but there's worse things. So it's like being in that, having that balance, and balancing those two things is part of the process.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I go through the same issues. It's like one day you're like, dude, what are you complaining about, bro? You have a roof over your head. You have access to all these things. Like, you hear about everything that's going on with Ukraine. We've seen what's happened for the past 20 years in the Middle East. Like, we understand that there are countries that are fighting for their lives right now.
Like, you can turn on your faucet and there's clean water coming out of
And
it.
there's clean, dude, we're not in Flint right now, bro. That's all I'm saying. But
Yeah.
no flame to Flint. I'm sure you guys are amazing. But my point being is that thought process though can have a negative correlation with you downplaying your issues, in which case I'll speak of my own mother. My mom will be like, she said it throughout my whole life, where she's like, "Oh, Eric, come on now. You could be in Africa starving to death right now. You could not have a roof over your head." And you know what? She's right in some degree, but I do think she's wrong in like using that as a reason to just say you're happy, because it's not enough. If you're going through a depression or an anxiety or whatever it is, you can't just tell someone, "Hey, be happy, bro. You're not this fucked up." It's not going to work. And it almost creates a negative impact of feeling like you're not being heard. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and
You could,
so
yeah.
to finish to like add to the original point is that a lot of mental health isn't fully researched in terms of like digestible information for the common person. So like I feel like I could go on Google right now and look up what 2 plus 2 is, and I'll find out it's 4. But if if I try to Google something as complex as like, hey, is it okay to feel these feelings, or is it okay to feel like I should be grateful? And you'll have 4 different answers to the same question based on their perspective and how they think through their problems. The same way that psychiatrists and psychologists, you have to go through a couple of them sometimes to find the right fit for you. And it's not as nuanced or not as direct of a solution, and not as black and white of a topic and a field. And that affects me personally because I don't actively see a therapist or a psychiatrist right now, which I should. But you only have your own mind to confirm or deny what you're feeling. So like you could look up information on the computer, but your mind's going to digest that information differently than what a professional would, or someone in the right mental space would. Like I'll look at, like, you ever see that dress that like looks like yellow to some people or blue to others?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I feel with psychology. Is like I may be interpreting it the wrong way because of my fundamental like brain activity over the past 20 years of how I developed into this person. Where if someone had a very good upbringing and like had a different set of circumstances, they would digest that information completely differently. And to not have a second professional or like a reference point to confirm and deny it makes mental illness in general hard to combat and hard to directly help by yourself. And one specific example that I could point to is the whole idea of long-term repercussions of not working out versus like spending my time in other resources. And everyone interprets this differently. Not everyone works out for their health. Everyone understands the health benefits of working out and exercising, but some people will take that limited time, that hour to 2 hours a day that they would normally work out, and they might put it towards their side business and their side hustle, and that's how they decide to generate additional income. That's how they decide to spend their free time. And for me, I think it's necessary to have the gym in terms of mental and physical health, but other people may not. And that mental anguish that some people suffer from starts to get intertwined with, hey, do I really need to go to the gym if all these people aren't going to the gym? Is it relative to me or is it relative to them? Am I interpreting this information correctly versus is my symptoms, are my depressions and anxieties causing me to think a different way than how I would normally interpret the information? And I feel like that's one of the hardest problems to solve. And I like how there's certain applications and services now, like Headspace, for example, that you referenced, that lets you access some of these solutions without having to pay an exuberant amount of money to see a psychiatrist or a therapist.
That's
And
a
what's your
great
what's your
point.
thought what's your thought on that in terms of what is the long-term solution to combat this?
Um,
Is
it's an
it
interesting.
additional funding? Is it that we have to teach more in school? Is it more
Well,
educational route? What's your opinion on that?
I don't know about funding or any of those specific areas. I do think that one way that we can start a good area to look into, start investigating, or something that we can take action on right now without having to worry about bureaucracy, whatever the case may be, is we can first of all have the conversation where we just by having the conversation, I think helps a lot of people. um when I was in the middle of like dealing with OCD and stuff like that, one thing that really helped me without fail, helped me every time, was understanding that I wasn't alone, knowing that I wasn't, that it's something that's legit and people deal with, and listening to other people just talk about their experiences and have these conversations. And I was able to get a lot from that and relate from it. So I think just having more conversations will just straight up help on a fundamental level. And two, I think what we can do much more frequently and potentially more importantly is remove stigma surrounding the discussion, because probably a lot of people are deal with these sorts of issues but aren't willing to have conversations surrounding it, or even admit that they're dealing with these kind of issues, and so they'll suffer in silence because they feel like if they tell their friend, hey bro, bro, I've been down bad, I've been crying or whatever. I feel like I'm a bum. I'm not going anywhere, whatever the case may be. Even though all of that might be bullshit. You might be in the gym working out, on your purpose, on your grind, doing your thing, at your job, hustling, making money, whatever. But you feel like you're down bad. If people have that conversation with a friend or something, they might be like, oh, but is this person going to think differently of me? Are they going to think that I'm like weird? Are they gonna is my relationship with them going to change? um am I now that guy that is dealing with a mental health issue? It's like, bro, like, everyone deals with shit, and it shouldn't be stigmatized where it's like you should be comfortable enough to talk to a friend about it and feel totally normal about it. Like, people deal with stuff all the time. And I think having a good support system and advocacy, which is what I was talking about earlier, listening to other people talk about it, um, really helps with that. Feeling like you're not alone and you're in it together in a group, and everyone's doing the same thing, everyone's dealing with the same stuff, and we can all together collectively find solutions, make each other feel better, pick each other up when we're down. I think that goes a long way.
To add to that, here I want to get a little more information out of you. When you referenced a couple of points I really liked. First thing is, I personally suffer from that issue you described, where you're talking about talking to people and letting them in on what you're going through. For me, I have to know the person is trustworthy and genuine before I would even consider talking to them about something like depression or anxiety. Um, if I do mention it to people I'm not too familiar with, it's very generalized. Like, yeah, I suffer from depression sometimes, or I do have anxiety once in a while. And I really won't divulge too much information, just because it's very personal. And I do know a lot of people, some people don't always have the best intentions, and they don't have the idea of what's best for you. I feel like the world has taught me a few things, and some people are out for the buck. Some people are out for their own personal reasons that might not coincide with your reasons. And so, what's your opinion on how much information you divulge? And also, a second question, and you could tackle both at the same time. Did you ever have a stage of denial when you first discovered these symptoms?
I definitely, to hit the second one first, I definitely had a stage of denial where it's like, am I actually going through, like, am I just, in my head? Like, is it all like what's going on here? Is this real? Whatever, am I just feeling weird right now? Maybe I'll sleep it off, whatever. I definitely had that. I literally thought to myself, at first when I first started feeling like onset of symptoms in like New York, I was thinking like, okay, it's because I'm here in this weird setting that I'm not used to, whatever. I'll be normal when I go back home to Miami. And then I got home to Miami and it persisted. And so the denial, I think denial definitely is part of it. It's like the first thing that hits you, right? And as for your first question, I think it really, of course, really depends on how how much you um trust the other person. So and I think it's also personality wise. Some people are very open about what they're going through. You know, they might just post it on their social media or whatever. Like there's some people that I follow that they'll just, they're very open about stuff that they're dealing with. They'll just post it and have like a wall of text, a monologue about like, oh, I'm going through this, I feel this and that, and then it's kind of like they're having a conversation with themselves on social media. And there's other people that you'd never know, that you just randomly hear about, oh, this person's dealing with this. It's like, oh wow, like they've been dealing with it for a while and we
They
never
have
knew.
they haven't even showed a symptom of it in
Yeah, and
front of you.
they don't show it at all. Um, and so I think I think it's very personalities probably plays a huge role. Me personally, I'm the I would say that I'm more reserved than maybe I should be sometimes. Um, and then probably because it stems from a feeling of like I don't want you and the general you to feel like I'm less than, to see me as less than, or feel like I'm in or something because I'm dealing with this issue, right? And I think that's toxic. I think that you shouldn't think that way. It's like you're going through something. It's fine. Everybody goes through stuff, and everybody needs help every now and then. You need to pick me up.
Do you
You
do
know?
you think, and I think this is a more nuanced discussion than simply like tell everyone or don't, obviously. I can only speak for myself, but there was a point in time where I really only suffered from depression, and it was very sporadic. So like a lot of it would be seasonal depression, where from like the months of November, pretty much the dark months of the year, that's when I would feel it the most. And usually around spring and summer, I was back to my normal self. And so I would hear like in my early years before I developed these other symptoms like anxiety, a little ADHD. Um, I would hear my friends telling me about their issues, and because of my lack of understanding, I did have a little judgment. But it wasn't like I hated them as a person or disliked them as a person, but I also saw it as like a tiny bit of a handicap. And obviously it was my lack of understanding. It was my inability to understand the issue at hand, and how a lot of people suffer from these things. But not to toot my own horn, but I do feel like there's a lot of lack of understanding when it comes to mental health. And I do feel like there are quite a few of my own personal friends that would look at me slightly differently if they knew the severity of like what I've considered and like what I've done, not what I've done, but like the issues I've gone through, and the topics I've had to talk to myself with. And I can't help but thinking even to this day there would be some backlash. And do you feel like that would be the same for you if you fully divulge, like, I know right now we're doing it on the podcast, but even before this point, if you talk to like maybe a friend that you weren't 100% comfortable with, or it was like a college friend, and you started talking to them about your whole issues with New York, and like I feel like some of them would look at you a little bit differently. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's something that's in the calculus. Like how much do I want to talk about this? Should I even talk about this? Like, and I think that circles back to like, what is a friend? You know, I
That's true.
think,
That's true.
yeah, dude. I think like a lot of people, like you might think that you have hella friends when really like you probably only have like maybe on one hand you can count like real friends. And I think
Well,
a
are real
good
friends friends?
r- well, exactly. I think a good like Rorschach test of like, or a good like bar test of like, is this person a real friend, is like, would I feel comfortable telling them the issue that I'm going through? You know what I mean? That's a probably a good indication. Like if you don't feel comfortable talking to someone about, a mental health issue, for example, because you feel like they might judge you, then perhaps it's we should take a look at our like the friendship, the relationship that you have with this person. Like, and so the question then becomes, this something that you tell again, like how much do you share and with who? So it's like, do
Mhm.
I only talk to my friends about this, my close friends? Because really it only matters, like how much does it matter to me that just my close friends know about this, as opposed to like maybe the next layer, like acquaintances or people that occasionally you hang out with, but maybe they're not really, you wouldn't really consider them a close friend, you know? So I think that's a judgment that you have to make. Like, who does everybody need to know about this? Or is it just my inner circle or people who I'm most close to that I can talk to about these things? That's a calculus that I think is made all the time. And I think it's not just with mental health, but with like a bunch of different stuff.
Everything, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I it's a very interesting, like, we're kinda getting derailed with the definition of friend. Um, it to me, I don't have a concrete answer for, like, what's considered a friend, what's considered a close friend, what's considered a best friend, what's an acquaintance, because it all blurs together to me, because I might have a good friend, um, that I wouldn't talk about mental health issues, or I wouldn't talk about our personal lives too much, but I would still consider him a good friend. Like, for example, like, say I have a gaming buddy, or like I have a friend that, like, a person I've known for 15 years, and we have a great time every time we go out together, or we have a great time every time we play games together. And like, we generally enjoy each other's company. I think sometimes some dynamics with friends don't include mental health. And I think that's okay,
I think
because
most of the time,
most of
I
the
think
time,
99% of the time,
I
you know
agree.
what I
And
mean?
the reason for that is because you don't want to burden the person with your issues. They aren't your therapist, they aren't your psychiatrist. And at the end of the day, if you know everything each friend's going through, you're gonna feel the responsibility and the need to message each person, to keep up with them. And while that's very good and wholesome, that person may not even wanted that. Like, it's very strange to, like, I don't know, like, like, you ever have a friend who had COVID recently? Like, an actual friend.
Uh, I
Ever in the
can't
past 2 years?
off top of my head. Oh, past 2 years, of course,
Yeah.
everyone's gotten COVID.
And what was your protocol with, like, that good friend? What would you do for that friend?
Well, it really depends. Like if it was people that I know from like nursing or whatever, it's like you just ask them like, "Oh, how you feel? You good?" And then they'll be
Like,
able to tell you like
how
because
how
we
many how
all
many times would you reach out to that friend during their illness?
probably just like the first time.
Now, if it was a very close friend, you might be checking in daily. Maybe, yo, how you feeling, bro? Anything looking up? Like, how you
Yeah,
coping? Like,
yeah,
and so everyone's different. Every friendship's different. But to
yeah.
bring that back to mental health, I think it the dynamic and our culture pretty much incentivizes us to not speak about this to our friends. And to get off topic a little bit, I feel like certain recreational drugs opens up a lot of those doors for people. Not to even get into any drug use, just saying that some people have been living such a structured, logical way of thinking, their own the way they were raised, to the parents they had, to the school they went to the girl they met, or the guy they met, or the they met, to eventually having this structured way of thinking. I feel like recreational drugs in some cases can open up that mind for them and see different perspectives they haven't seen. And actually, and this is not to throw anyone under the bus, but some of the most open times I've ever had with friends was when we were under those recreational drugs. And so I'm not advocating for drug use, but I'm saying that there's a stigma in America, or maybe the world. I can't say neither here nor there, where mental health is still shunned, to the point of, if I ask an older generational adult about mental health, half of them will say, like, why do you even need medication? Like, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just being sad. And
Yeah,
and I know this happens for a lot of different people, where they're talking to their dad or their mom or a relative, and they hear you getting prescribed Zoloft, for example, and they're like, "What? They're giving you Zoloft because you're sad? Because you don't want to wake up in the morning? Just get up your ass. I walked 10 miles a day when I was your age. Like, stop, like." and it creates a dynamic, especially in the workplace, where like even though I know it's a very liberal thing to do in terms of like, hey, I'm going to take a mental health day. Are you actually going to admit to that to your employer? I feel like most people are still afraid to even do that because it shows weakness in a way. And what's your opinion on that specifically?
Yeah, I think it circles back to the whole stigma thing. I think it really just comes down to that. Like, there's a lot of stigma surrounding medication, surrounding treatment for various different conditions. Um, and so it's like, oh, you're on Zoloft? What the fuck? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're only, you're 28 years old. Why are you on Zoloft, bro? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just go outside, bro. It's all in your head. Like, stop being a bitch. Like, this kind of attitude, right? Um, which I think at the end of the day is not healthy. It's very toxic. It doesn't help anybody. Because if it was just a matter of like stop being a bitch, surely that would have happened already. You know what I mean? So if you can, if there are different treatment modalities that you can benefit from, and you will see benefit from it, and it will improve your quality of life, what is wrong with that? Now there could be something said about like, for example, it could get controversial on things like, maybe not specifically tied to mental health, but for example, like patients who are very or like morbidly obese, 600 pounds, and they'll get like a gastric sleeve, right? When it's like, you could have the conversation of like, hey, okay, that's gonna, shrink your stomach, and that means you're gonna eat less food, and that means you're gonna lose weight. Well, it's like, well, if you're either way, you're gonna eat less food. Like, the easier solution for is, oh, I'm just gonna get the sleeve. When it's like, you could just eat less. Well,
Well,
and then it becomes like a behavioral thing. Then it's a behavioral thing, and so there's a lot of discussion to be had about this specific thing. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on it, but to answer your general question, I think it comes down to stigma. I think the biggest issue is that there's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health.
so
And
information. We need information out there.
information, and not just information, advocacy. People talking about it. Like, it is normal. It's fine. It's okay to not be okay sometimes in terms of mentals. It's fine, dude. Like, everybody goes through it.
One
Not a
of
lot of
my
people talk about it.
favorite bands that I discovered at the start of the pandemic is this band called AJR. I'm sure you've heard of them at this point. They're pretty popular.
Can't say
They
I
have.
have.
I'm sure you've heard one of their songs, like "Bang." Like I'm not going to sing it for the podcast, but I'm sure like if I showed you some songs, you would definitely recognize at least one of them.
Maybe,
Um,
yeah.
And one of the reasons why I really like them is that they talk about this stuff in their songs. Like one of their songs is like I'm a okay, and the whole idea, the theme behind the song
Is
is
that the
like
one where it's like, ayo, ayo, that one?
no, 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 no. I know that one too though. That's a different artist, but
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
the idea is that like they're very open about talking about their mental. And one of their songs they released. Let me see if I can find the song real quick. Uh, they released it during the pandemic. It was called Way Less Sad. And the lyric goes, let me go ahead and pull up the lyrics real quick. The lyric goes, I'm A okay. I'm A okay. You say it, but you just don't mean it. You're so insane. You're so insane. Shut up and just enjoy this feeling. And the lyric, what I interpret it as is like their mental state is affecting their enjoyment of something as cool as like being a band and going on tour or like whatever they're pursuing in their opportunity. um and the lyrics then go on to explain how like uh I believe the lyric goes, no, I ain't happy yet, but I'm way less sad. So what they're trying to say is like, hey, they're getting better. Like they were really sad at one point. um I'm not there yet, I'm not like happy, but I'm less sad. And very few artists hit on like these mental like loops like AJR does, and they're a willing to 100. They have a song that they talk pretty much about their OCD, about how they stay up at 3 a.m. like talking, thinking about random intruding thoughts throughout the night. Like that's my favorite band for the past 2 years, and it really opened my eyes up to like this whole mental health journey I'm going through right now, where I've always tried to tackle like depression because I've gotten diagnosed. I've been to a psychiatrist for it, but like recently over the past year or two, anxiety and a little like OCD, for example, whatever it is, um, I've been more self critical of, like where I'm like, all right, so what symptoms do I have? What does WebMD say? And like, are there any correlations between the two? And that opened my mind to the exposure of what we're representing. So like, it's not only a median on like podcasting, for example, or maybe it's teaching, but it's also music itself. Like music was the reason why I've been taking mental health a little more seriously recently. And I think that's what we need. We need medians of conversation, which is what I love about this podcast that we're currently going through, is that we're both very open, talking about very hard hitting topics that may resonate with some people in any capacity. And that is, I think, the goal of the first step into conquer. I don't think it's ever going to be fully solved, but getting to a better resolution for the average person is the more knowledge, the more power, the more we can do with it. And right now, I think there's a lack of information that has been increasing over the past years that we're going to see really like bear the fruits of labor in probably 5 to 10 years, 20 years. There'll be way more mainstream solutions that currently aren't available.
Yeah, dude. I think that's a great point to kind of, bring it all together where it's like what we're doing right here is we're having the conversation, and that it's in itself is advocacy, and that in itself is spreading the message, and people are talking about it, and a lot of people can benefit from it. And so with that being said, dude, I think that we've talked a lot about a lot of subjects. We've covered anything from what are real friends to mental health,
Yeah.
fucking, the government. You start talking about Byron.
Whoa, 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 whoa. That was a small segue. I'm not I'm not expressing my political opinion as of right now.
Anyways, we talked about a bunch of stuff. I think it's been a great episode. This is probably a good point to kind of end it here. We've been, we've been recording for over almost an hour and a half now.
Yeah.
So just to whoever watches this, probably gonna be nobody, but because we're little fucking, it's our
Little
first,
scrubs.
our second
Hey, people will
video
come back
ever.
to this. People will come back to this. They'll see the scrub work and they'll be like, "Oh, this is where they
I
started.
respect it.
This is where they laid the little caterpillar to become a butterfly."
There you go. So, if you guys enjoyed the conversation, let us know. You
Like,
can leave a comment.
subscribe,
You can
all the
leave
good stuff.
I think it's cringe to say like, oh, like, subscribe, comment, whatever. It's
It's
like
cringe.
everybody fucking does that. Like, obviously, I would enjoy it if you liked or subscribed to my shit. But
It
I
is
mean, if you don't,
cringe.
it's all good. If you enjoyed it, just let me know. It's fine.
How about we
Um,
do a comment? If you enjoyed it, leave a comment. You don't even have to
yeah,
like the video. And
or just
even if
hit me
you
up.
go ahead, go ahead.
I'm gonna link our socials in the description. Just hit us up. Tell us if you like the episode or whatever, what your thoughts are on it. If you yourself are dealing with any mental issues or whatever the case may be, or if you enjoyed any of the discussions that we had today. Really appreciate it, Eric. It's been a goddamn pleasure.
Of course, next week we got to put out episode 3. No more slacking.
There you go. No more slacking. Let's
Conquer
get on the train.
conquer the mental illness of our
There
own.
you go.
All right, have a great
Use
time, guys.
Headspace. Use
Hey,
Headspace. Everyone.
use yo, are you
Obviously, we're not
sponsored? Like, can
sponsored.
we get a sponsor in here? Because I don't know, maybe we'll get a little
Nah.
some royalties. Anyway, have a great time, guys. This
All right,
was
guys.
the IRL Quest with Leroy and Eric, Eric and Leroy, whichever way you want to say it. Have a great night, all right?
Take care. Deuce.